You're watching Power Nation.
Welcome back to Dirt and Trails. We are here with our 94 F-150 we're calling Leadfoot. And today, we're measuring for some custom drive shafts, figuring out our fuel, and starting to add some body panels.
And I get to do a cold air intake and put the exhaust on this thing. I guarantee this is going to be exhausting.
So now that we've got our complete drivetrain installed, we need to take some measurements and get our custom drive shafts ordered. Now, before I actually go and start making these measurements, I want to check our angles to make sure those are right. Now, the reason that drive shaft angles are important, I'm going to demonstrate with our original stub shaft out of our front axle. So you can see when it's straight, everything's going to turn nice and easy. Start putting a little bit of angle on it, well, it gets a little more complicated. But if you put too much of an angle on it, well, right there, you're gonna run into binding issues, snapping U-joints, all kinds of crazy stuff that you really don't wanna deal with, especially out on the trail. So, we're just gonna take our angle finder and check it out. So, the first angle I wanna check out is from this output shaft on the back of our transfer case. You wanna make sure you've got your U-joint straps removed, and you wanna make sure you're not using a side that has a bunch of grime and buildup like this one here. So we're gonna go ahead, stick our angle finder right there. Make sure that this is settled. Hey, Chris, you wanna come over so you can write these down just so we can keep track of it? Rear output on the transfer case, we got 4 degrees. Okay,
Do you want a jack so that is vertical?
I was actually just about to ask. And that's got us at 3 degrees positive. So that's not too bad. There's only a difference of 1 degree there. I think the bigger issue is just the fact that there's such a height difference between these two. So I think maybe when we go to order it, we order a double cardan on the front side just to be safe. What that is it's just a coupler that contains 2 U-joints to help with misalignments like this, height differences. It's gonna take a lot of the strain off of the joints. So yeah, I think that's probably something we're gonna look into. Now to do that, we would have to remove this yoke and bolt on a plate instead. So we're still gonna take a measurement with this setup just in case. I think at the end of the day, we're gonna end up throwing a different output on this, and we'll probably go with the double cart. Now in our case, we've got fixed yokes all the way around on this transfer case. So we're gonna have to order what's called 2-piece drive shafts. It'll be a little easier to explain if I get out of here. So this is actually the original front drive shaft out of this truck. Now, obviously it's not gonna work for the setup we have now, but it is a good example of what a 2-piece drive shaft is. And it's called that because it's 2 pieces. As you're driving down the road, your suspension has travel in it. So your drive shafts are gonna have to change length or position. Now, in the case of a 2-piece shaft, as your suspension travels, it's gonna change length to take up for that. In a regular setup with a slip yoke, it's gonna take that length up somewhere else in the back of the transmission. Now, the last thing we gotta do before we can actually get all the information sent out to the drive shaft company to get these things made is we need to know what U-joints we're running. Now, I've actually got 4 different sizes here in these 3 U-joints. So we've got a 1480 here, 1350, and this is what's known as a conversion joint. It's a 1310 and 1330. Now you'll notice that really the only difference is the cross size. Now, when you're measuring U-joints, that's one of the measurements you need to take is the width of the cross. Now, you can get that off of your yokes. We're gonna do that here in just a minute. The other measurement you need is the cap size, which you also get off your yokes. So let's get back under the truck and I'll show you guys how to get those measurements. Now, obviously, if you've got loose U-joints laying around, you can use those to get your sizes. Or if you've got a new axle, we know that this is a 1350 in the rear, but you're not always gonna know that. So let's go ahead and just get this out of the way. Now, if you need to take measurements to figure it out, here's how you're gonna do it. To get your cross size on this style of yoke, you can see it's got a stop right here. Some will actually just have a tab that's gonna serve as the retainer for your U-joint cap. You're gonna measure from the very edge of that to the very edge of the other one. So there we've got 3 5/8 or 3.625. That is gonna tell us our cross size. Next, you need your cap size. So for that, you can either use a tape measure, just right here, again, from the very edge to the very edge going across, Here we're looking at 1 3/16. Now that we have all the information we need, and we know we're gonna change this out for a double cardan and put a larger yoke on the front side of this transfer case, I'm gonna go ahead and order those. And then we're gonna double check, verify our measurements once it's installed, and from there, we can go ahead, get our drive shafts ordered.
After the break, a 5-point harness, which this one is, this will suspend you in your seat if the vehicle's on its roof, which is what you want. It stops you from being a ping pong ball inside the cab. Now we're gonna get the seats installed in our truck here that we got from Simpson Racing Products. And Eric actually picked these colors out and the whole schematic, and it actually turned out pretty good. So let's get them installed. Now it's time to move on to the harnesses. Eric chose these 3-inch wide Simpson Racing Products harnesses, and they are a bolt-in style. So what I had to do was grind off a little bit of the paint, weld on a tab onto the crossbar here, and then go from there. So now we're gonna bolt these in and carry on. There's several different types of seat belts out there, 3-point, 4-point, 5-point. A 5-point harness, which this one is, you have 2 over the shoulders, 2 that connect in the middle with the waistbands, and then 1 up through the crotch that connect everything together. The reason ideally you would go with something like this in an off-road application is so you stay in your seat. In case of a rollover, you're not going anywhere. This will suspend you in your seat if the vehicle's on its roof, which is what you want. It stops you from being a ping pong ball inside the cab. Next up, the exhaust. I had to make a few changes. This is the original header that I had planned on using, and I had to cut off the flange that came with it. Reason was I had to do some elbows and all that other funky jazz to get down between the bell housing, past the starter, past the frame, and it was a pain to get it in and out every single time. Not only that, the amount of bends that I would have had to cut and use that came in our kit wouldn't have allowed me to build out the rest of the exhaust. So I ended up having to change headers. I went with the set of Hedman headers that we also got from Summit Racing, which ended up pointing us in the right direction right off the hop, right out of the box. So it was a smarter choice. It also worked on the other side as well. Everything's flowing nice and smooth. We're off to the races. The passenger side is coming down and straight back. The driver's side is gonna come down underneath the transmission and bell housing and then come around and intersect with the passenger side. What that's gonna allow me to do is take the only O2 sensor that we're using, and it's gonna read both banks now instead of just the passenger side. Now, the key point you wanna keep in mind is you want this about 8 inches behind the header. This way it doesn't get cooked or anything like that. And to be honest, the more heat you can throw out these things, from what Pat and Frankie says, the better rating you're gonna get. So, I got more work to do. I should just use this one. Coming up, I can clearly tell you played 0 sports in high school.
Nope, I was too busy working. We're gonna have to shim it. What'd you do with those shims?
I don't know. It has been so long.
This is why we can't have nice things, Chris. Now that we've got the core support on here, I mean, we've got plenty of room in here. I think we're gonna be able to get away with running a mechanical fan on here, which works for me. Now, we're gonna get a lot better airflow out of that, and I don't have to deal with wiring up electric fans. So, win-win.
I can clearly tell you played 0 sports in high school.
Nope, I was too busy working. So what we're doing here, putting just the driver's fender on, is Chris has to fabricate an intake because we don't have a whole lot of clearance between that throttle body and the hood. So we need the hood on, but he still needs access in there while it's attached. So putting this on is gonna let us install it, and he'll still be able to get in there. Yeah, we've got quite a few adjustments we're gonna have to make here. Well, we're also
We're gonna have to shim it. What'd you do with those shims?
I don't know. I don't know. It has been so long.
This is why we can't have nice things, Chris. Probably should have took the bolts out before we put this thing up here, huh? All right, so alignment-wise, we're not too far off. Right now, we gotta get this intake figured out, which, that's all you, buddy.
This is going to be the top end of our intake. This is a turbo hat that I stole from the guys down at Engine Power. They have no idea I have it. Let's put it on before they find out. Could you open the hood, please?
Yep.
All right, my plan is to have this sit like that. And then have some tubing come out, and then have our filter in a box, or even honestly just hanging out right about here. I need to start designing our cold air intake. I would like to have as straight of a line coming in as possible, and having this end of the cone pointing into the corner of the fender and rad support. So I want it to look something like this, like a big arrow. That's what I want. Okay, so where we're gonna start is with our filter, and specifically the hole right here. You're not gonna find a piece of tube that big, so I'm gonna have to take a piece of flat bar, wrap it around, and then use a strap to compress it. So my thought, because we have the factory intake here, what I wanna do is I'm gonna blow that out as big as we can.
Do you wanna go with a smaller filter?
No,
No?
why would I?
Take up a little less space, then you wouldn't have to do so much adapting.
I'm not worried. So what I'm doing with this knob here and crank assembly is there's a threaded rod, and this whole arm, this whole top arm, goes through the body and into the machine. The bottom arm is stationary, and what it's doing is I have an upper and lower die, and it's moving the top die into the bottom die, thereby squishing the material and putting form into it, thereby bead rolling it. So my next step that I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put this into the brake. I'm gonna do all my 90s, and then I'm gonna do my 45s, and then we're going to keep trucking along. Got the filter in the first chunk here, and I'm just checking for clearance. I don't wanna put it somewhere where Eric is gonna get hosed. That's gonna be it. So now that we have one of our main pieces done, now we need to start thinking structural. My next part that I'm gonna design is actually the plate that is gonna go on this surface here, and there is going to be an inner piece. It's gonna be two pieces. It's gonna be the only piece that I can think of right now that is going to be welded together. This is what's known as a slip roller. What it does is you have two drive rollers on this one, which is your top and bottom, and this rear one actually moves up and down. You need to be careful, make sure that you're moving both sides at the same amount. If not, you're gonna start making corkscrews. I have everything set up the way I want it to, and now what I'm gonna do is put the material in, make sure it's square. You can do that. I know this end is square, 100%. So what I'm doing is I'm putting it in on a slight angle, and when I feel it catch on the other side, I know that that's flat. When you go to do this, never cut your material to the exact length that you need for your circle. So if you need a complete 6 inches of material to do your circle, don't cut 6 inches exactly, cut yourself 10. This is why. You can see how on the edges here and here, it's flat. I have to cut that out to make my circle. You know, I'm not far off all the way around. I am actually fairly content with that. All right, now I'm just gonna let that cool, blend it down, roll it out one last time, and we should be good to go. Now that we have this seam welded up, I'm gonna go ahead, fit it to its proper backing plate. From there, I'm gonna install it into the cold air box, and then after that, into the vehicle. This way, the 600 horsepower big block Ford will allow us to have clean, cool air while we're out having fun.
Coming up, we're gonna take this up into the truck bed, figure out how we're gonna mount it. All right. So now that we're up here, we're gonna go ahead and figure out how this thing is gonna get mounted in this bed. There are primarily three things that an engine needs to run. It's gonna be spark, which came along with the engine, air, which Chris just finished up, and the last thing is fuel. Now I'm gonna tackle the third leg of that triangle right here, and we're gonna do it using this Summit Racing aluminum 20-gallon EFI fuel cell. It's already baffled, so we don't have to worry about a whole lot of slosh, which we're definitely gonna be doing a lot of tossing this thing around. And it came with a pre-installed 0 to 90 ohm sending unit that is gonna jive perfectly with that Summit Racing fuel gauge we've got in the dash. Now, to actually get the fuel out of this nice, beautiful fuel cell, we're gonna be installing the last piece of our Phytech EFI system. That's gonna be this pump setup. These things are actually pretty straightforward, and there is a lot more that comes in the kit. It even includes instructions and all the parts you would need to convert your original fuel tank to an EFI tank to use this pump in it. But since we have the fuel cell and it came with a pre-installed bung for a 6-bolt fuel pump, we're gonna go ahead and just bolt everything right in. But before we can do that, we gotta take some measurements. We're gonna be measuring from the bottom of the fuel pump flange, so our measurement needs to be to the top of this flange right here. And that's looking just about 10 3/8. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and snip that off, and then we'll do a test fit. That is excellent. Now we're gonna just take a look here through the fill hole. All right, so looking inside of there, you can see we are just a hair away from the bottom of the tank, which is exactly what we're looking for, because once we add in the gasket, that's gonna give us the perfect standoff for our pre-filter to sit exactly where it needs to. So that's good to go. Now, I know I don't have them on the table here with me, but it's important to note that these do come with really good, really detailed instructions on how to do all this, and I highly encourage you to use them. Black is our return line, white is gonna be our pressure line. So what we're gonna do is make sure that we orient toward our line that we actually need to be using. Just to verify that our depth is gonna be correct, we're gonna add our pre-filter, snap this on into place. Looking pretty good right there. Now, mark on our pressure line, slip our clamp on before we forget, then we're gonna cut this at a 45-degree angle. Now, I'm gonna bring in our heat gun. Once it's softened up, we're not trying to melt it or anything like that. We're just trying to soften it up enough that we can put it over this nipple, and then it'll help create a seal that the hose clamp is gonna guarantee. Just like so. Now we can go ahead and put our zip ties on, secure this to the shaft. We're gonna go ahead and wrap our connector around just one time to shorten it up, take some of that length out, make sure it stays nice and tight with the rest of the assembly. Now these things can be kind of a pain, but just get that filter snaked in there. Don't forget your return line. Yeah, there we go. So now we just gotta decide which direction we want to orient this. We're gonna want it positioned so the lines come off of the side so that they can either go straight down through the bed in a bulkhead fitting or just with a simple pass through with some grommets on there to keep those lines safe. Take all these guys out so that we can line everything up. And you're not going crazy on torquing these things. You just want enough to hold it in. Make sure you get a nice, good seal. So now we're gonna take this up into the truck bed, figure out how we're gonna mount it. All right, so now that we're up here, we're gonna go ahead and figure out how this thing is gonna get mounted in this bed. All right, so we've got a rough marking of where this needs to sit, and the way I'm thinking is we're gonna use some of this 3/4 inch flat strap. I've already got one part made. We're gonna bolt this strap down to the bed. I'm gonna take another section of the same strapping and build a strap that goes off to the back of the tank and then down to the floor just like it does on the sides. So now that we've got the second leg of our strap bent, measured, and fitted in place, I've got it lined up here on the table, everything's squared up. We're gonna tack these corners, that way we can flip it upside down, we'll weld the bottom and then grind that smooth, then weld across the top. That way, you know, we don't have to worry about any of this stuff. That to me, looking pretty good right there. So the last thing we've got to do to get that fuel cell hooked up to our engine is to get our lines made. And what we're going to be doing that with is some AN line. The fittings on our tank are -6, so we're going to be working with some -6 lines and more -6 fittings to get it connected there and at the engine. The fittings and the hose we're using both came from Summit Racing. It is Summit Racing brand, so we know it's going to be high quality and give us no reason at all to worry. So first things first, you want to make sure you've got a nice clean end on your hose that you can work with to get your fitting installed. We're just going to have to do a quick cutoff to make sure we've got a nice flush, even, clean end to work with. So now we are ready to get our fitting installed. First things first, we're going to get the collar put onto the hose. What you're looking for is on the inside, you want the end of the hose that you cut to be even with the bottom of these threads in as far as it can go. Once you got this side of your fitting installed onto the hose, you're ready to put in the other half of your hose end. Now we're gonna do just a little bit of assembly lube on these threads here. This is gonna prevent these threads from galling up or seizing. Make sure you don't have any issues there. Now we're gonna go ahead, get this down as far as we can. Just like that, we've got a nice solid AN connection. It's ready to get fitted onto our fuel tank, run up to our engine. I've got to do a few more of these to get all of our lines done. I'm gonna finish that up and catch up with you in a minute.
Now that we have fuel and power, all we need to do is mount the starter. You got that, right?
No, I thought you were gonna get that.
No, remember when I was designing and we were chatting back and forth about which one to get?
Well, it's quitting time anyways, so guess we'll have to fire this thing up next time. See ya.